Hello friends, welcome to another video. I love calculation groups. I have done many videos on calculation groups. You check out my playlist on YouTube. Again, this video is on the calculation group, mainly focused on calculation items. Calculation items are part of calculation groups. In this video, I'm not going to talk about what calculation groups can do and what things we can achieve with it, but it's more about how we can organize calculation items in a calculation groups. For example, let's say there is a calculation group and which has a 20 calculation items. Right now, if we want to use those calculation items, let's say we're using those calculation items as a slicer, then we have to pick it one by one what we want to see it in the visual. Let's say there's a matrix visual, we want to show quantity, amount, sales, discount, so we have to select one by one. But what about if we really want to create a group of calculation items so that when users select a set of groups, then all the calculation in that group show up in our visual. It's like country has a state. It's like a grouping. So if we select the country, so we see the sales of all the states of that country. Similarly, we want to organize our calculation items in different groups so that instead of selecting one by one manually, we can select a group and then all the items show up. There is no out-of-the-box functionality available in Power BI. With this video, I'm going to show how we can achieve that easily, and we can maintain it very easily, and we can scale the solution very easily. To do so, I created one calculation group called My Metric and created 5 different calculation items under it. And then what we're going to do is, out of those 5 calculation items, we're going to group them into 2 different groups. One we will call sum, other one average, and then specific calculation items will go under a specific group, and then selection of the group, we will have our visuals work accordingly. Let's look at Power BI how we're going to achieve it. But before that, I will show you what I have done already with my calculation group to what is already there. So here in Power BI, I have one calculation group called My Metrics, and the item under this, or the column under this, is called metrics, and it has the 5 options: sales, quantity, average by category, country, and customer. Right now we see those all calculation items in our metrics visual. So as we select different options here in our slicer, only those selected items show up in, or the metrics show up in here, calculation items in other words. Again, if there are like 15-20 calculation item and we want to select some of those together, it is very, very hard. For example, in this case, I want to create a solution where I want to create a group called average, and all my average related calculation item are part of that group. So when I click on the average group, then it will show all the calculation items which are part of the average group. So to achieve so, let's first look at the our My Metrics table here. What does that look like? So when we create a calculation items, we have 2 columns, calculation group, and we have a 2 columns in there. One is the name of the calculation item, which we name of the column in the calculation group, which we do at the time of creation of the calculation group. So in this case, I have the column name is metrics, and then these are the 5 different our calculation items, and each calculation item is performing some calculation. Like sales one is sum sales, quantity sum sales, and these average. That does not matter. Whatever the calculation is, that's part of the calculation item. And the other column is ordinal, which is basically how we want to sort these ones, right? If you want to show sales first, quantity, and then that's the index in other terms. And you can change that in the calculation items when you're creating calculation items. Mainly, I use tabular editor, so basically we do it here, there. Now the question here is how, if my ask is, okay, I want to group my averages into one group and other measures or in another group called sum group, how we can do that. So let's start writing some code. First, what we need to do is we need to create a separate table which will have this grouping. We can create the table with the DAX from this My Metrics table, or we can also store this value in outside somewhere. But let's begin with if we are creating it within Power BI. So we go to modeling tab. Let's create a new table. And I'm going to call it matrix group so that we know that our matrix calculation items are being, this table is used for that. So let's call it matrix group. And let's store this in a variable. What we need to is let's call the metric calculation item. Which can be a distinct or select column, and all this stuff doesn't matter because the calculation items are always unique. I can use any function values, distinct, select columns, doesn't matter. What we need here is we need all the items in our my matrix table, which is basically my calculation group called my matrix, and all the items, calculation item under that, I need a table of that. So this will return us a table. Let's take a look at what this table look like. It's going to be one single column with all the calculation items in it. Let's go to, once this is created, matrix group. So we have 5 rows in here, right? So these are all 5 different calculation items. Now we want to group these together. To do so, I can write a logic here or whatever the way it works. So let's say my logic is any calculation item that contains AVG, it means that's average, and rest is sum. Maybe this is a simple logic for me. In your case, the logic could be totally different. Then it doesn't matter what the logic is, but basically we want to add another column to define in which group this each calculation item belongs to. So this is what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create another variable here, metric calculation items with group. So basically we're going to add a column to our variable which we already created, which is in the step 1, metric calculation item. So we are adding a column into this one, and let's call it metric group. What column we want to add? The name of the column. So that is metric group. Now here I need to basically iterate over each line item in a way and say, okay, what group it belongs to. So I can write a logic, my logic here, if contains string, I'm going to use this function. If my metric column contains average, so I want to assign this as in my metric group will be called average. Otherwise, I want to call it sum. Again, in your case, the logic might be different. You can use a switch function. Basically, what we're doing is we're giving our business logic for each calculation item in which group it belongs to. So let's say now return this as our value. And we will see another column here. Of course, metric group. So now first 2 are is a part of the sum group, and others 3 are the average group based on our logic. So now once this table is created, let's try to bring the table in here as well as a slicer. So what I'm going to do is from my metric groups, I'm going to bring, this is the new table we created, metric group, and then the metrics, and then change it to slicer. Actually, skip it here. And let's change the font size. Let's make it the same as the other slicer. Okay, perfect. So now what we have is we have an average which contains 3 calculation items, and sum contains 2 calculation items. But at this point in time, nothing is going to work. What the expected behavior is, if I'm saying average by category, if I select that one, this should filter average by category as it is working in the regular calculation item, the original table which has been created. But nothing is happening because this particular table right now is a disconnected table. It doesn't have any relationship with anything, and nothing is going to work. The obvious question comes is the easiest way is have this table, have relationship of this table with our original calculation group table, and then everything should work. So let's try to do that. Go to the relationship tab, Let's add a new view. So I'm going to bring my metric group, the new table which we created, and my matrix, which is the original calculation group table which we created through tabular editor. So what matrix we know is the common value in both the tables. And if I try to set a relationship here, it and you will see there's an error message, and that error message tells you that calculation group table my matrix which is not allowed. So basically you cannot have a relationship with the table which is a calculation group. So unfortunately we cannot create the relationship. Since we cannot create the relationship, so what we how we achieve that when we select any make a selection in a slicer in our new table, how we filter our the original calculation group table which is called my matrix. So again, tree task functions will come handy in here. I did many videos on the tree tasks, so do check out those videos. I will post a link for that as well. But let's start writing a measure. So first we need to write a measure here. So I'm gonna go back to our visualization page here, and then let's write a measure, and let's call it filter metric. And that measure will do the magic for us. So let me show you what that measure will look like. So let's call it filter metric. Let's call it filter metric calculation item. So what we want to do is calculate count row of my matrix. Again, my matrix is the original calculation group table which we created through a tabular editor. And then what we're going to do is keep filters. Again, I'm not going to walk through the DAX and why we're using key filters and all the stuff. There is a video I did on key filters and tree tests, so do check out that video. So we're going to say tree test, whatever values are selected in our new table. So basically that is matrix group matrix. So whatever the metrics are selected in our new metric group table, use that, because the value will return a table, use that table and filter our original calculation group table, which is my matrix, and which column we want to filter, matrix. So basically let me write it down and I will walk through what this DAX function will do. So this particular measure will return the number of rows selected, basically one, because each metric calculation item has only one row. So it will return one for each row what is selected in this slicer. So if we select all of this, so every calculation item will return one. If whatever the items are not selected, that will return, this measure will return blank in that case. So basically whatever is, so right now if currently I have selected average by country, only that measure will return the average value 1 for average by country, but for rest of it will return blank value. And if we clear this, and as we know how the slicer works, right now if no selection is made, every item is deemed as selected. So right now it will return 1 for all the calculation items in our original calculation group table. Now once that measure is done and it is returning the count rows, basically 1 or blank, whatever is selected is returned 1. If it's not selected, it will return blank value. And now from here it is very simple. What we need to do is we need to go back to our external tools and go to tabular editor. We need to tweak our calculation items. We need to tweak the calculations in our calculation items, and what that tweak is going to look like. Let's open the tabular editor here and go to our my metric calculation group, and then these are the calculation items. So the sales, which is just a sales measure, and the sales measure is a sum of sales. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say multiply this with filter metric calculation item. Now What does this mean? What we're doing here is, as you know, as we just talked about, filter metric calculation item will return one for the each selected calculation item. If I selected dollar sales in my slicer here, and it will return the one for dollar sales. So that's this calculation item, and we are multiplying. If the sales is $100, multiply with one will return the same value. But if sales is not selected, the filter metric calculation item will be blank, and once it is blank, we multiply blank with our measure, which is a sales measure. It will return no value, it will return blank. And once the blank returns, that item, the calculation item, will not show in our visual. As you guys know, in Power BI, if any measure returning the blank, it does not show up the value in that measure does not show up in the visuals. So that's what we are forcing here, to return the blank value based on the selected and non-selected items in the slicer. So what we need to do is we just need to use this multiplication in each of our calculation items. So I'm going to go to the quantity, whatever the quantity, sum of quantity, and just multiplying with that. Go to average by country, category, whatever the logic is there, multiply it with this. Also this one, and also this one. So now apply the changes. Okay. So now changes are there. So right now nothing happened because every item is selected, but let's see what happens if I select average. Now it will only show those three average calculation items. So if I decided to use sum as well, so now I'm selecting a group. Now all those items, so I'm going to remove this original measure, which is based on the calculation group, and this measure is based on the calculation group we created. So there's no need of this now. So basically what we have is we have a new table and a new slicer, the way we want to group those calculation items. Now we can select the items we want. If I really want to select only sales and average by country, I can select items from the multiple slicer, multiple values from different groups. Or I can simply, now it's very simple. If I really want to see the averages only, I just select one group, and then all the items are selected for that, and then we are only seeing the average. And if I just want sum, and then I'm only seeing the sum. And again, you might have a different logic how you want to group the items, and you can do that. So if I select nothing, everything will show up. So this is working as expected. So hope you find this video useful. Basically what we did is we created our own table from the calculation group table, and we grouped calculation items in different segments or different groups. Whatever the business logic you want to use, you can use that. And then we use that for our new table, which we created in our slicer with the group and the calculation items underneath it. And then we added new filter, a measure, sorry, which filters, check what is selected, and it filters the calculation items. And then from there onward, everything is working as expected. You can create that calculation group. Maybe you want to store that metadata somewhere else, maybe in a table in SQL or somewhere in the SharePoint list. Basically, doesn't matter how you create that metric group table. But the one thing is important, however you create that, the calculation item, the column value has to match with the calculation items, so that we can filter the calculation items from our calculation group based on the selection. Once this whole thing is done, everything is working perfectly fine. We can now organize calculation items the way we want, easy to select, easy to use. Let me know what you guys think about this. I haven't seen any solution like this before. Did you ever resolve it or figure out another way to do it? Do share your solution. I'm also going to do more videos on calculation group. This topic is very close to my heart. Do subscribe my channel and learn a few things about calculation groups, and do check out other videos which I did on calculation group, and provide your feedback. Until next video, have a great day. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye for now.